After living in Mexico long term, I realized there are things no one ever tells you before you move. Most Americans move to Mexico focused on the positives, but few hear about the challenges that can wear people down over time. These hidden realities are often why some expats eventually burn out or decide to move back. Drawing from data and expat insights featured on livingcost.org, Budget Your Trip, and The Earth Awaits, we reveal the hidden challenges of living in Mexico long term. Make sure to stay to the end to discover the surprising reason many expats eventually struggle or leave. Some Americans move to Mexico chasing peace, only to realize they brought their stress with them. For a lot of people, moving to Mexico starts as an escape plan. They're burned out from expensive cities, non-stop work culture, rising bills, traffic, pressure, and the feeling that life back home has become emotionally exhausting. Mexico begins to look like the answer to everything: a slower lifestyle, cheaper living, beautiful weather, beach towns, fresh food, and the promise of finally feeling free again. And at first, it can absolutely feel that way. But one of the biggest mistakes Americans make is treating Mexico like a permanent escape instead of a real life transition. Some people arrive believing that crossing a border will automatically fix their unhappiness, stress, loneliness, or lack of direction. They expect the scenery alone to create inner peace. For the first few months, the excitement of a new country can mask deeper issues. Every taco stand feels exciting. Every sunset feels healing. And everyday life feels like a vacation compared to the routine they left behind. Then reality slowly settles in. The same anxiety, relationship problems, financial stress, or personal habits that existed back home often begin to reappear. The only difference is now they're happening in a different country. Bills still exist. Loneliness can still exist. Purpose still matters. And eventually, the fantasy version of expat life starts colliding with normal day-to-day living. That's the part social media rarely shows. A new country changes your surroundings, not your internal life. Mexico can absolutely improve your quality of life, but it cannot replace emotional stability, self-awareness, or long-term fulfillment. The people who thrive long-term usually aren't the ones running away from something. They're the ones building a life intentionally, with realistic expectations about what moving abroad can and cannot solve. At first, living in Mexico can feel like stepping into the life you always wished you had. Many Americans arrive with a vacation mindset without even realizing it. Every day feels exciting, colorful, and full of possibilities. They wake up late, grab coffee at a beach cafe, eat tacos for lunch, try a new rooftop restaurant at night, and spend weekends constantly exploring nearby towns, beaches, markets, and hidden spots they saw online. Compared to the stress and routine back home, it feels liberating. For the first few months, life feels less like normal living and more like an endless travel experience. But that's where the second major mistake begins. Some expats continue living in Mexico exactly like they're still on vacation long after the honeymoon phase should have ended. Eating out daily becomes normal because meals feel cheap compared to the US. Constant exploring turns into a lifestyle. Days lose structure. Sleep schedules shift. Work routines become inconsistent. Financial discipline slowly disappears because every experience feels justified in the moment. At first, it feels exciting. Then eventually, it starts becoming draining. Without structure or routine, people often begin feeling mentally scattered and emotionally ungrounded. The constant stimulation that once felt freeing can quietly become exhausting. Even paradise can start feeling unstable when there's no balance between relaxation, productivity, and normal daily responsibilities. And this catches a lot of people off guard because Mexico itself isn't the problem. The problem is trying to sustain a vacation lifestyle permanently. The lifestyle that feels exciting, short-term, eventually becomes exhausting. People who successfully stay in Mexico long-term usually learn this quickly. They create routines, they cook at home more often, they build consistent work habits, friendships, fitness schedules, and daily structure. In other words, they stop treating Mexico like a temporary escape and start treating it like real life. Because eventually, the excitement of constant movement fades. And when it does, the people who last are usually the ones who learned how to build stability inside a lifestyle that originally felt like freedom. Stick around. We're talking about what happens when you recreate American comforts in your Mexican lifestyle. Next, the faster some Americans try to recreate their old life in Mexico, the faster they lose the benefits of moving there in the first place. For many expats, the move to Mexico begins with excitement about living differently, simpler living, lower costs, a slower pace. But after the honeymoon phase fades, something interesting starts happening. Little by little, some people begin rebuilding the exact comforts they left behind in the United States. At first, it seems harmless. They start searching for imported groceries because they miss familiar brands and foods from home. Then they upgrade to luxury apartments in heavily expat-focused neighborhoods because they want modern kitchens, filtered water systems, high-end gyms, and American-style conveniences. Food delivery becomes daily. Private drivers become normal. Streaming subscriptions pile up. Weekend spending increases because they want the same comfort and convenience they were used to back home. Before long, their monthly budget starts looking surprisingly familiar, and that's when frustration begins setting in. Many Americans move to Mexico expecting dramatically lower living costs, but the reality is that the more you try to replicate an American lifestyle abroad, the more expensive life becomes. Imported products cost more. Trendy expat neighborhoods often charge inflated rent prices. Constant convenience spending quietly adds up faster than people expect. But the financial side is only part of the issue. The more familiar you try to make life, the harder it becomes to truly adapt to the country around you. Instead of embracing local culture, routines, food, and ways of living, some expats stay emotionally attached to recreating home, and ironically, that often creates disappointment because nothing feels exactly the same anyway. The more familiar you try to make life, the more expensive and frustrating it becomes. The people who tend to enjoy Mexico long-term are usually the ones willing to adjust instead of constantly comparing everything to America. They shop locally, simplify their lifestyle, and slowly learn to appreciate Mexico for what it is, not for how closely it can imitate the life they already left behind. What wears some Americans down in Mexico usually isn't one major problem. It's hundreds of small frustrations slowly piling up over time. In the beginning, most people barely notice the daily friction. The beaches are beautiful, the food feels exciting, and everything still carries that sense of adventure. But after the honeymoon phase fades, everyday inconveniences start becoming part of normal life, and for some expats, this is where the real adjustment begins. The bureaucracy alone catches many Americans off guard. Simple tasks that once took minutes back home can suddenly require multiple appointments, paperwork, long wait times, or confusing processes. Residency renewals, banking issues, utility setups, and government offices often move at a slower pace than many people expect. Things eventually get done, but not always quickly or predictably. Then there's the noise. In many parts of Mexico, quiet suburban silence simply isn't the norm. Dogs bark through the night, music plays late into the evening, fireworks explode unexpectedly, street vendors announce themselves early in the morning, traffic sounds echo constantly in busy areas. At first, it feels lively and cultural, but over time, some people begin craving the calm and predictability they once took for granted. Transportation can also become mentally exhausting depending on where someone lives. Roads may feel chaotic. Public transit may operate differently than expected, and driving itself can become stressful for newcomers unfamiliar with local patterns and road conditions. And then there's the inconsistency. Internet outages, delayed services, maintenance issues, delivery delays, or sudden schedule changes can slowly wear people down emotionally, especially those used to highly structured systems of back in the United States. None of these problems are necessarily deal breakers on their own, but together they create a constant low-level stress that some expats struggle adapting to long-term. This is where many Americans slowly start questioning the move, because living abroad isn't just about enjoying the highlights, it's also about learning whether you can emotionally handle the everyday realities that come with a completely different environment. And for many people, that adjustment ends up being much harder than they originally imagined. Keep watching to find out how living solely inside the expat bubble can affect your Mexican living. Some Americans move to Mexico searching for a new life, but end up recreating the same social bubble they never intended to leave behind. At first, the expat community feels comforting. New arrivals naturally connect with other Americans and foreigners because it's easier. Everyone speaks English, shares similar experiences, recommends neighborhoods, restaurants, doctors, and helps each other navigate life abroad. In the beginning, that support system can make the transition into Mexico feel smoother and less overwhelming. But for some people, that comfort zone slowly becomes permanent. Instead of integrating into local culture, they spend years living almost entirely inside expat circles. Their routines become limited and predictable. They visit the same foreign-owned cafes, attend the same social gatherings, and interact mostly with people who already think and live similarly to them. Even after years in Mexico, some expats never learn more than basic Spanish because their daily life rarely forces them to. At first, this lifestyle feels convenient, but over time, something deeper often starts missing. Without meaningful local relationships or cultural integration, everyday life can begin feeling strangely shallow. People may enjoy the weather, lower cost, or relaxed pace, but still feel emotionally disconnected from the country around them. They observe Mexico instead of truly participating in it, and isolation can slowly creep in without people realizing it. Many expats eventually discover that being surrounded by other foreigners is not the same thing as feeling rooted somewhere. Because once the excitement of moving abroad fades, human connection becomes far more important than scenery or affordability. You can live somewhere for years and still feel disconnected from it. The Americans who usually thrive long-term in Mexico are often the ones willing to move beyond the expat bubble. They build friendships with locals, learn the culture, improve their Spanish little by little, and allow themselves to feel uncomfortable sometimes. That's when Mexico stops feeling like a temporary lifestyle experiment and starts feeling like an actual community. And for many people, that difference changes everything. Make sure to watch all the way through. You won't believe what we found to happen should lifestyle inflation slowly takes over your Mexican lifestyle. What starts as everything is so affordable here can slowly turn into spending more money than you ever expected. For many Americans, one of the biggest thrills about moving to Mexico is how inexpensive life feels in the beginning. Restaurants cost less, rent feels cheaper, housekeeping, food delivery, transportation, and entertainment all seem far more affordable compared to life back in the United States. At first, it feels like financial freedom, and that's exactly where lifestyle inflation quietly begins. Because when everything feels cheaper, spending starts feeling harmless. Eating out daily becomes normal because meals cost less than they would back home. Weekend trips feel easy to justify. Delivery apps become part of everyday life. Small purchases barely feel noticeable in the moment. And over time, Those cheap expenses slowly stack together into a lifestyle that's far more expensive than people originally planned for. Then comes the upgrade phase. Some expats move into premium neighborhoods filled with luxury condos, rooftop pools, trendy cafes, co-working spaces, and modern amenities designed specifically for foreigners. The lifestyle feels exciting and comfortable, but the monthly costs begin rising fast. Rent increases, imported groceries cost more, social spending grows, convenience becomes addictive, and because each expense still feels cheaper than America, many people don't realize how much their spending habits are changing until much later. That's the trap. Mexico doesn't suddenly become expensive. Your lifestyle slowly does. The people who succeed financially long-term are usually the ones who stay intentional about how they live. They avoid turning affordability into an excuse for constant consumption. They build routines around sustainability instead of impulse. And most importantly, they understand that moving abroad doesn't automatically create financial freedom if spending simply expands to match the environment, because eventually, even in a lower cost country, uncontrolled lifestyle inflation can recreate the exact financial pressure people were originally trying to escape back home. You'll want to see what happens should you live in Mexico with no long-term structure or purpose. What surprises many Americans in Mexico is that freedom without direction eventually starts to feel empty. In the beginning, living in Mexico can feel like endless possibility. There's no fixed routine holding you back, no strict schedule dictating your days, and no pressure to follow the same path you had back home. For a while, that drifting lifestyle feels exciting. You wake up when you want, work inconsistently, explore new places, meet new people, and enjoy the feeling of not being tied down. But over time, that same freedom can start to lose its charm. Without long-term structure or purpose, days begin blending together. What once felt like spontaneity slowly turns into aimlessness. Some people stop building routines altogether. Work becomes inconsistent. Goals become unclear. Even relationships and personal growth start taking a back seat to short-term experiences. And that's where burnout quietly begins. Not from overwork, but from lack of direction. When there's no structure guiding life forward, motivation starts fading. The excitement of living abroad no longer feels enough to create meaning on its own. And instead of feeling free, some expats begin feeling stuck in a cycle of temporary highs and emotional lows, unsure of what they're actually building long term. At some point, the excitement fades, and you realize you still need to build a real life. That's when people start realizing living abroad isn't about finding paradise. It's about adapting to reality. And that realization changes everything. You'll be astonished how that realization changes everything. What no one tells you about living in Mexico long term is that the hardest part doesn't come at the beginning. It comes after the excitement fades. It's not that Mexico is difficult. In fact, for many people, it feels amazing at first. The food, the culture, the pace of life, and the affordability can make everything feel like a fresh start. But over time, reality settles in, and the real challenge begins. It's not about adjusting to a new country, it's about building a sustainable life after the novelty disappears. And in that phase, a few things matter more than most people realize. Routine matters more than excitement. Without structure, even the best lifestyle eventually feels unstable. Systems matter more than scenery. Beautiful places don't create stability. Daily habits, financial organization, and personal discipline do. And adaptation matters more than fantasy. The more you resist reality and try to force your expectations onto a new country, the harder the experience becomes. The people who succeed abroad aren't the ones chasing freedom. They're the ones building stability. So how do you actually enjoy Mexico long term? Here are the 3 rules I'd follow living abroad again. First, build structure immediately. Routine creates stability, especially when everything around you is new and unpredictable. Second, choose sustainability over excitement. Long-term thinking will always outlast short-term thrills. And third, adapt instead of compare. The moment you stop trying to recreate your old life, you start actually experiencing the one you're in. Because living abroad gets better when you stop chasing escape and start building a real life. Mexico can absolutely be incredible long-term, but only if you avoid the mistakes that quietly ruin the experience. When you approach it with intention instead of fantasy, it stops being just a destination and becomes a place where a real, grounded life can actually grow. For a deeper look at what living in Mexico is actually like beyond the vacation version, watch our other videos exploring the day-to-day reality of life abroad long term.